Welcome back to another episode of the Data Center Exchange, a Harper Harrison podcast, hosted by myself, Connolly, and designed to shine a light on the data center industry and get the insight and from some of the most respected professionals across the industry. Now, today we're talking about one of the biggest challenges facing the digital infrastructure world right now. And the biggest risk to new data centers today isn't always about financing, power, or permitting. Increasingly, it's actually coming from local opposition and winning the support of local communities. So, according to a recent Gallup survey, 71% of Americans now oppose data centers being built in their local area. And in fact, that's higher than the amount of Americans that oppose new nuclear facilities being built as well. And even more interestingly, this is a genuinely bipartisan subject. So, we're going to keep building the digital infrastructure that the economy depends on, then we need to understand why communities are pushing back. And no better person to help me navigate this complex topic today than Mara Ervin. Mara, welcome to the Data Center Exchange.
Thank you, Del. It's a pleasure to be here and one of my favorite topics to talk about. So,
Well, lots to cover. It's been in the news. I think the first thing I saw when I landed in the US last week was just, I think I put on LinkedIn, it was just a news article on one of the local news channels about how the local governor is, heavily opposing data centers in West Texas. And that was literally the first bulletin I saw. So, it's front and center of everywhere and definitely a great topic to be covering today. But going back to just to you first and foremost, just to kick things off, you've kind of worked across many different businesses from startups, from Corning to Wesco, and now on the development side. What pulled you into that and towards kind of adaptive reuse and community engagement initially?
yeah. Thank you again for having me on today, Del. It's been a pleasure getting to know you as we've prepared for this day. Yeah, my entering into the mission critical industry kind of happened by chance. A lot of folks that you'll talk to never really intended to be a mission critical. In fact, I was raised on a farm, grew up in a rural area in North Carolina, and I was going to school to be a journalist, and I was waitressing, trying to get by, and my table was an IT company, and they offered me a job in mission critical. That was Corning, and I ended up staying with them for 12 years. And fast forward, I just fell in love with technology. Um, I think I went into my first data center in early 2000, which at the time wasn't really a data center. It was in the basement of a telco building. I don't even know if it was redundant, but it just captivated me. I wanted to learn more about it. And so my experience up until the last couple of years has been building out the infrastructure to support these data centers, technology spaces. And then about 3 years ago, I decided to go out on my own and start my own consulting business because I kept finding gaps in the industry where we just needed more speed, more agility. And I could pick and choose and align partners through my consulting business to help meet my customers' needs. And one of the things that really came up a few years ago was the need for more space and power. And we're running out of that, right? We needed to get more creative and just add more resources. And so I started to explore something called adaptive reuse. I had seen it used by a couple of partners where you use existing infrastructure, dying assets, and I really wanted to focus on that. And that's what led me into introduction into the firm that I work for now. But yeah, I love the development side because we do have uh, the biggest part of this is obviously overcoming this need and finding more space and power for our digital infrastructure. But for the reason for this call is it does take a lot of community engagement, and we just look at things a little bit differently. I do personally in the firm that I'm a part of. So yeah, so that's how I ended up here developing.
And I know the community engagement is something you're passionate about and heavily involved in. And as I said at the top of the episode, it's really the kind of the challenges, the legal challenges, the moratoriums are really kind of gathering pace and more frequent. They're in the news all the time. What's behind that? What's driving that, do you think, at this
Yeah.
moment in time?
Yeah. So if we just let's just pull out the moratoriums because we are seeing more and more of that. And what if we because we've had some moratoriums in states where we're actively working. And one thing that I'm seeing is it's not a let's stop building, let's not build data centers. They're having to pause for education. They're having to pause to get a plan together, and it really is a direct relation to the mark that we've missed in the industry because now they're having to what we should have done over the last 10 years and as of late is more education. So now these governments are actually having to pause and create an environment where they can actually focus on the educational piece, the why of digital infrastructure, the how we're building digital infrastructure, and more importantly, how they want it built in their communities. Because we have to take what we have to do as an industry to build out that infrastructure and then apply it back to the needs of the community and already how they're building out their innovation districts, their industrial districts. So now they're pulling those as they're becoming more aware in those moratoriums. It's now part of a kind of a work stream for them. And it's unfortunate that, I would take that back. I don't know if it's unfortunate, but um, the moratoriums, again, I think we've shifted the responsibility from us into the government sector. And I think if we approach it a little bit differently, don't be afraid of a moratorium. We should jump in and help. So if as soon as I start seeing a community say, "Hey, we're a sponsor of a bill or a sponsor of somebody coming in saying, hey, we need to start a moratorium," that's when we need to get engaged immediately, start setting up meetings because that's they're actually asking for our help. They want us to come in and meet with them. A lot of them are actually creating a task force within these governments to help them with these technical sessions, how to understand how we're using water, the technology, because we throw around these terms of closed loop, and they want to know more about it. So I would say now the government is actually taking, and these local municipalities are actually taking more of an initiative to become part of what we should be doing as a industry and educating uh, and bringing the community with us as we build out the data centers.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate it. The education piece is critical. So for me, the industry's blown under the radar, probably purposefully over the last kind of 10 years or so. And on many of the other podcast episodes I've covered, we often talk about how people don't really understand what a data center really is. And as a result of that, people certainly don't know how a data center really operates and works and the impact that it does have. So that education piece, even in making the industry a career sector of choice as well, the education piece, it's all super important. What do you think? Maybe not necessarily from personal mistakes, maybe from personal mistakes, but that mistakes that are being made early in projects that really have an impact. How can they be handled? What are those mistakes, and how can they be
Yeah.
handled much differently?
That's a good question because we do talk about this a lot, right? Buddy Reiser, he's one of the godfathers in Loudoun County, and it's the mecca of data centers. So why not look at what we've done right and wrong in Loudoun County? Because there's a lot of great that we've done, but there's a lot of lessons learned. And Buddy's one of the first ones that will say, "Hey, I helped build this thing, so I probably know what we did wrong." But I would say one of those. Let me pause for just a second. I'll turn on my do not disturb here. I don't know if you heard that ping.
No, I didn't.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah. So Buddy Reiser, one of the biggest things that he actually talks about is by nature, the data center industry is very secretive, right? Our users, our end users, our hyperscalers, we all kind of live and die and breathe by NDAs and confidentiality, and everything's just top secret. And so, even within the industry itself, it's hurt us because if you look at how technology and innovation, I think it could have moved a lot faster and a lot quicker if we had moved more of an open framework, which OCP, the Open Compute Foundation, they've done a tremendous job with this. So not only has that hurt us in terms of innovation and things like that. But I think it's hurt us in terms of how we've arrived here at this place where that lack of transparency has created kind of this mystery with the community and the industry. And they think that now that we're hearing more about AI, now all of a sudden data centers and AI is the new thing. I think they relate AI and data centers in the same, like, hey, AI is new, so data centers are new. No, data centers have been around a long time. And most of us in our communities have had data centers right down the street from us in our entire lives and really didn't even know data centers were there. We're looking at entering the Florida market, and Florida has hundreds of data centers, little telco pop rooms and data centers. Every state across the country has data centers, but most folks just don't know they exist. So I think now this AI thing, now that it's taken over social media, now this is this new terminology, this new word. And human nature is we hear something new and we relate it to what we know. And when we think about AI, we think about, movies, the robots with the red eyes. And, it's this kind of the scary thing of it's going to take over the world. So I think from an educational perspective, two things need to happen. One, I take that back. Two things need to happen in terms of educating the community, and that's being more transparent about what we're doing in their backyards. We can't fly under the radar. In fact, a lot of the bills and things that are getting passed right now, they're requiring you to be more transparent about who's building, who's coming to who's actually owning this data center, who's building the data center. But also, we have to take on that ownership of educating the community on what a data center is, the history of data centers. We had to do the same thing with electricity. Every student in America goes through and learns about Edison and the light bulb, and we have to do the same thing with data centers. We have to take it back to the roots and really make it part of our history books, because there is a lot of history in data centers. And the third thing is also the necessity of digital infrastructure, because I think that's one thing that's missing. It's not AI and data centers. We talk about how it's not replacing the human, but we need to really do a better job of explaining what that really means and how important the human is, and in terms of research and development and growth. And the way that I like to look at it and explain it to students and high school students is the human brain. We have so much information inside of our brains and a lot of knowledge and wisdom that really on its own, it's almost limited by our own flesh. We're our own skin, our own,
Yeah.
we're our own limitation. So what I say is that AI and data centers are, not only does it help us pull and do something more with that information, but it also helps us get that information out. So if we look at history, like with the printing press, which you would think that the printing press would be this great, magnificent thing, right? When we think about what it's done for humanity. But at the time, it was kind of got ahead and started the Protestant Reformation. So it's like, all right, but the printing press did very similar. It was a way for us to, one, gather information, gather our thoughts, and actually get that information out and spread the message, spread the information. And so that, I think, at the root of it with our students, and that educational part that we can do very, very early, is explain, one, how uh, digital infrastructure, because I don't like to use the word just data center. It's actual digital infrastructure. How do we, how is digital infrastructure used to help the human learn, process information, and then again, communicate and get that information out? If we look at the world as a whole, digital infrastructure, data centers are part of it. Digital infrastructure, if you look at the world, I mean, you think about, we have communication pathways of cabling and things like that into the heavens, under the oceans. We are wildly connected. already. It's a thing. It's not something new. We are wildly connected, and it's actually given us the opportunity to grow as a civilization, share information, and data centers are just a small part of that. And so, if we can talk about digital infrastructure as a whole and how data centers are required to be part of that as we store information, process information, and then step further, be more transparent. Um, and thirdly, we do need to build in a more sustainable way and more responsibly. And to answer your other question, back to the original question, what could we do differently? I think the technology piece, we absolutely have to own that. We have to build. We have to build better. There's technology at our fingertips. It can't be an afterthought. We have to bring in our design engineers and architects and get ahead of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. The because you're a resident, you were a resident of Loudoun County yourself, wasn't you?
Yeah,
And worked in the area considerably as well.
yeah.
So,
Well, that was a big
oh,
decision for me because I was from North Carolina and again lived in rural North Carolina. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to come in and start educating about data centers and advocating for this thing that I've been building for 20 years, I probably need uh, to live there. And I did. I lived right in off Loudoun County Parkway between a few data centers. So every morning that I got up, I'd have to drive past, and because one of the things that community members will talk about is noise. And I thought, okay, well, let me just see how this affects my daily life. And so I did. I actually lived right there in Loudoun County, drove by the data centers on a daily basis, not just to get to them, but just to drive through. And so, yeah, I experienced it firsthand.
so for local residents, I think traditionally there's been talk about kind of tax revenue and tax benefits and jobs, but they're things that don't really attach emotionally to people in many ways, I guess. So just from your experience and understanding, what is a benefit that a person actually feels day to day in somewhere
Yeah.
like Loudoun County, for
This
example?
is that's absolutely, I'm glad you brought this up because we've actually heard from the community that they want us to stop talking about the tax benefits and because they still have these issues with data centers. So then we started to dig into that a little bit, and we're like, all right, what's the missing link here? Why are they pushing back on the tax revenues and the benefits? And I think the number one reason is because it didn't directly impact their families. Either A, they didn't feel like they had control of how that money was being spent, or two, it didn't directly benefit their family. Like, okay, we understand that these are the benefits, and you're actually using this in a great way to benefit the county, but how is it benefiting me as the farmer? How is it benefiting my family? And so this goes back into this is what I really love to talk about is when we get into communities where we're building data centers and they don't know what a data center is and they don't have the workforce, they probably don't even have the curriculum built into their schools yet. That is where you start early. And that's how you're able to actually tie, eventually, when you do have the tax revenues, you've built the how we use that money. It's directly tied into how we've built this community up along the way to get them ready for a data center, which requires a lot of work. And I learned this from a dear friend, Brian Darby at QTS. He runs a group, or is actually helped build a group called the Arizona Data Center Coalition. And I truly believe every state needs this or a model and a representation of this. And one of the things that Brian taught me was, if you go into a community and you want to start talking to them about being accepting a data center and building a data center, to your point, we have to find out how does it benefit that community. And Brian said, first thing you do is you leverage local resources and you look for programs and nonprofits and things in the community that one need our help, maybe just financially, and it may not even directly benefit digital infrastructure directly, but indirectly it might. So, for example, um, if you go into a community and you're 3 years away from building a data center and you start identifying local nonprofits and programs for students, we obviously have a workforce development issue, right? So let's say we get a data center approved. Well, then how are we going to build it? We're already having trouble getting that workforce to get together. So this is where you can come into the community and start identifying workforce talent. It might be your 18 to 21-year-olds who have no idea what they're doing for college. Maybe they did grow up on a farm and they just want to do something different, but they don't have the money. They want to be in technology. They maybe they want to go into engineering or some type of skilled trade, which I love talking about because there's a lot of I meet kids every day that once you start telling them about welding and they go in and actually watch a welding class, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. We need welders, we need electricians. But coming in and identifying, working with the local high schools to say, hey, your graduation rate is really low, right? You don't have a lot of kids even graduating high school. Why not? Well, they're not motivated because they don't have the money for college. They don't want to go to a 4-year university. They kind of just want to do a skilled trade and they think they can do that without a high school diploma and they think they can just do that by apprenticeship or just learning from their family or whatever. Well, there's a better way to do that. And so we'll like to go in, work with those local communities, identify those students, and create the curriculum, which the Arizona Data Center Alliance is doing. They actually have operators, Microsoft, Meta, they're all coming in and they're actually helping create the curriculum for these students. They're also adjunct professors, which they love. I know I have a friend, Ryan Hicks, Equinix down in Texas, and I saw one day he actually posted that he was teaching a class for high school, like once or twice a week, or maybe it's the community college. And he said that's his favorite part of his job and his day. So I love examples of that. TJ Saccone, he's was with Stack at one time, but he's also now a great example of this, getting into the community and actually working and identifying that local talent. So back to your question, how do we actually make this benefit tax revenues and things like that benefit the community? We find the gaps. We find the what the families need, what the communities need, and we start building that out. And then the other part of this is the workforce that's there. If you're a union community, you need to be meeting with your IBWs and your leaders to say, hey, you guys have never built a data center. There's a data center coming to you. How do we get your guys ready? And usually the first thing you'll hear from them, and even if it's not a union town, the contractors will tell us, oh, we build data centers. They're just 4 hours away, 6 hours away. You're telling me I can get my guys to sleep at night with their families? Let's absolutely get them trained up and upskilled and used for your data center. So that's the other part. Meet with your local contractors, meet with your local general contractors. Even if you bring in outside resources, the data center experts to build your data centers, you absolutely need to be using the local community and the local workforce. So that's another part of it as well.
Yeah. No, I mean that community. This is all about community engagement, building transparency, trust, and yeah, that whole communication piece sounds like it's central to everything and that openness. But when someone does raise a concern, how is that genuinely how is it genuinely met out there, and how should it be handled essentially as
Yeah.
well?
So one thing that we really see that's beneficial is the community meetings, and it has to be done in a very thoughtful way. Because I think when we started initially with these community meetings, it was more of us getting up and kind of doing our little pitch deck and throwing up the key terms up there of closed loop and things like that. What we quickly learned is that social media just ate that up. They're like, all right, you're just kind of just telling us what we want to hear, right? So where I think it really works is when you come in and you do work sessions with the community, with the stakeholders, and they become part of the solution. And that's exactly goes back to what we opened up this call with is or the podcast with is the moratoriums. It's kind of that same thing. We can get there without the moratoriums. And some of these moratoriums are actually still they're kind of putting a cap in, like 20 megawatts or less are okay, or existing data center upgrades are okay, because I kind of know, like, hey, we still need this thing to keep moving. But as far as the community approach, you can't just go in and host a community town hall and then just educate and leave 10 minutes for Q&A. What we're seeing is they're coming in battle ready, and they're not really even listening to anything that you're saying. They're just waiting for their 10 minutes or their 2 minutes with the mic. That's all they're there for. And so that, I think that the framework for those don't work. I think what we need to do is put a lot of planning. And that's one thing that our founder at Stonebridge has taken a great interest in, is actually going in and meeting with stakeholders, identifying who those people are that can actually help us, um, understand their community needs, and make sure that we're aligning our actions and making them part of the solution. And that solution, when I say solution, it's all those things we've talked about just now. It's how do we build a data center that fits into what the community is building? How do we build a data center that brings the who with us, the people, the workforce, and brings that with us? And then thirdly, those folks that will never really build the infrastructure or directly benefit, they just want to be educated. And so what we've done is we've actually set up work sessions and work groups with tables and round tables. And we have people that can come in, and you sit at a round table based on the discussion point. Maybe you want to talk about power. Maybe you want to learn more about water. Maybe you want to learn more about tax revenue and tax benefits. And so you set up these roundtables, and you bring in subject matter experts or part of the development team, and you actually meet with these folks, and through that, not just educate them, but identify needs and solutions early on, viable solutions that we could track towards, and then make them a part of that solution. And you'd be surprised. I mean, it does two things, because even though the communities, that these town halls that we're hosting, it kind of becomes like this greenwashing, whitewashing thing, where we just kind of just, they hear what we're doing, but they don't really believe in it. They're like, hey, you're a developer just trying to make money. Why should I believe anything you've got up on a slide deck, right? But when they become part of a real work stream, and you build relationships, and they really start to see that, one, hey, if we're going to build a data center, we want to do it the right way. And our team and my partners will be the first to say no to an opportunity, because one, we believe that a data center doesn't align with what that community needs. It's the wrong spot for it. So we like to say no. And we like to go into areas where we do really believe it's a good fit: industrial applications, brownfield assets. Um, those are we have to take on a more proactive approach in how we are actually siting as well, so that we believe in it, right? Because, like,
Yeah.
we haven't really talked about this yet, but I grew up on a farm. Now I'm part of a farm winery, and there are places for all of these things, but we have to work with the community, and we can't just go in and secure land under the radar with an LLC that doesn't say anything about data centers, and just think over the next year we're going to be able to sneak in a data center. Those days are gone. We've done it.
Yeah,
We've
I was
done
going to
it.
say
Yeah,
you're bringing in the community and very early on at the really early stages and making it interactive by the sound of it, which is fundamentally different to what another strategy could be, which is you said those days are gone, but there must have been times where silence and secrecy have been the strategy from projects that you've seen or observed or been a part of. I don't know, but um,
absolutely.
how does that impact kind of outcomes taking the other side of the approach, the other strategy?
Yeah, yeah. Exactly to your point. I still am seeing it. So I'm still seeing announcements, and you just have to look and see, an LLC in Delaware was set up, and again, it's still that same type of framework of let's just try to do this secretly, right? And I don't know exactly what this is going to look like in 6 months or a year or 2 years from now, because I think part of this change is going to come by regulation, and then some of it's going to come by the way that we change intrinsically how we approach these projects. I do think regulations are going to be a more of driving force of this transparency, but I would say when somebody first hears about a data center is coming to their community, and it could just be the local uh, government officials might hear about it through a broker or something like that. If the first time that a person hears about it and it comes across to them as a secret, top secret, non-transparent, it automatically sets the precedent for a couple of different things, misinformation. It just puts them in a position of they're now having to find out more information about the project. So I think the key part of that, where I've seen the success, is just as early as possible meeting with the government, community officials, stakeholders as early as possible and tell them this is what we're looking at doing. Let's talk about it. What's best for your community, and how do we do this in a transparent way and bring the community with us. We just recently um, backed out or kind of separated ways from a community that the local government was actively citing an overlay technical district, but I still saw they were still trying to do things in a fashion that were too fast for the community. Processes like, hey, we actually, if we do this way with a text amendment and do this and this, we bypass community involvement, we bypass the community votes, and it's just not working anymore. Anytime we start with those language and those thoughts, we have to pause. And that's one thing that I love about our firm is we will slow down. And I'm learning that individually is slow down, because that's what we do. Our industry go fast, 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 right? And it's scary to slow down because we could miss out on opportunity to have infrastructure ready for the next user. But what we're learning is if you look at some of, I think I sent you this digest that I get weekly of projects being shut down. It's not because of power and water or whatever we can't get access to. It's the entitlement. It's now the top priority, and it's the number one thing that's turning shutting down these projects. So I would just say that's probably the biggest thing that's changed is it's now a big, big part of whether or not a project's going to be successful, and transparency across the board from the very beginning. How do we bring the community with us? And it's just so different. It really is completely different. When I first went to the Microsoft campus down in Boynton, Virginia, Highway 58, when you drive up, you see the sign, and it just has the address, and that's it. You just see the address and you don't even know what's there. Everybody there in the community knows what's there, right? They know it's Microsoft. They know Microsoft is there, and now they've kind of changed things and now everybody knows they're there. But I think those days are gone where you drive up and see a sign and you don't know who it is. Now, I do believe that there are still classified federal data center SCIF environments that should be top secret, and there's a way to handle those as well. Um, but one thing I think that we're also going to start seeing is we're not going to see as many hyperscale campuses. I think that those are going to continue to still happen, but there's a huge opportunity for stranded power. There's a huge opportunity for infra sites, and those are great opportunities. And that's the perfect fit for some of these small communities because they will never know there's a data center in their backyard. They're these small little data centers. So it is about the operators when they're building out their availability zones and where they actually need to build next. How can we look at our infrastructure and our planning of our infrastructure? And they're all doing it. How do we do this in a way that we could actually use smaller, desegregated data centers to actually build out our digital infrastructure as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. You mentioned some of the top secret kind of facilities. How did you get that balance right between the kind of the transparency aspect, but the necessity of a particular build or facility being top secret?
Yeah, so that is tough. We don't personally, we don't do a lot in the that area. In fact, what we're learning too is uh, there's a great need for more skiff space, and there's a huge demand for it. So I think the beautiful part about that is obviously the government. This is government infrastructure, right? This is where their
Yeah,
information is going to sit. So I still think that there is a way for them to take the same approach. Obviously, they're going to do that in a more closed environment, but you can still bring the community with you and the needs of the community without uh, being as transparent about what you're building, right? Because we actually need to
yeah,
keep that classified to protect us as a
yeah.
nation. So
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you because you're building yourself, aren't you? Something we talked offline, something about your community playbook. And I know this is
yeah,
something that you're building out in one of your own projects, and obviously wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about that and what the core principles of that were really, because it sounded really interesting.
yeah, so it's evolved since we last talked. So what I found out was I was not the only one out here building a community playbook. And I have a dear friend, Karen Petersburg. If you've not had her on, we should come back and
I
we'll talk.
haven't.
Well, let's do that next because Karen is a really good friend of mine, and she also works for a developer, and she has built something called the human collective model. And I may get that wrong. She's the brains of the operation, but at the center of all of this that we're building, what Karen has done a phenomenal job of is pointing us back to the human, right? The human element. And how do we actually, what's greatly underappreciated is the human mind, the emotion. That's something that Karen believes we can actually make sure that as we build AI out and data center infrastructure out responsibly, that we actually bring the human emotion with it. And so, back to my community playbook, as I'm building this out and still building it out, Karen, we identify there's people all across the world that are building out digital infrastructure that have the same passions as I do, and what I needed to stop doing was building this thing out on my own. So we have created something called the Data Center Awareness Network. And I'll give Karen a lot of the credit for getting this started, and a few other folks, Jason Hamilton, Emily Sullivan, a few others, Amy Dunton. But as soon as we put it out there, there's actually a WhatsApp group. And if you want more information about it, send me a note, an email, or something. We'll get you added. But what we found out is that there's leaders all across our digital infrastructure that are very passionate about this very same thing. And so um, that community playbook is exactly what we've kind of talked about today is for me personally, it's how do you actually go into communities and bring them with you as you build out the infrastructure and you make sure that it aligns with the community. And it really is just kind of step by step, kind of the things we've talked about, just a few examples of, when we go into a high school or you go into a nonprofit, how do you actually bring them along with you? And again, there's also indirect ways that you can help a community, because we've gone into communities where we were on, up that night for a vote, something around our development agreement. And if you sit in these meetings long enough, you actually start to hear other things that come up. We heard that the lunch free lunch deficit, they had like it may have been I may have this wrong. It was like $30,000, $40,000 of debt of students who couldn't afford their lunches. So, those are opportunities. If we have the ability to come in and actually pay those things off and help give this community just a better chance of just starting. I just think about, I get kind of emotional about this because I think these students didn't have an opportunity, and then we're going to come in, and if we really do this in a very special way, this is life changing for these. It gives them a better way of life. And um, uniforms. There's a community where students are required to wear uniforms, but they're so I think less than 20% of the students can afford them. So just imagine going to school every day. You're required to wear a uniform. It's very easily to see the kids who have money and the kids who don't have money. And to me, you're starting out early, uh, differentiating these students. And as a human, they grow up with that. So if we have a way to, one, give them an opportunity, change their way of life, and then give them an opportunity in digital infrastructure, we just have to think bigger. We have to think grander and bigger. And I think that's what the Data Center Awareness Network is doing. The community is one pillar of it, but it's I would say it's the most important pillar. Is how do we make sure that we are benefiting the entire community, not just the ones that directly benefit from the actual building out the infrastructure and things like that. So, but yeah, the Data Center Awareness Network, we're really excited about it. I would say it's a great replication of what the Arizona Data Center Coalition has done, where it brings in operators, we bring in technology, we bring in community, and we're creating a repository. So, Dell, I can't tell you how many people say, "Hey, I would go into high schools and colleges and communities and talk about data centers, but I don't really have a slide deck. I don't really have, what do I take? How do I go and do this?" We're going to make it easy. We're going to create toolkits, and we're going to create presentations and resources, and leverage other communities. So there's already groups doing this: 7 by 24, AFCOM, um, who else? Data Cloud, the Nomad Futurist, iMasons. We all have all these repars, and this goes back to the same thing. We all like to do our little thing in our sandbox, and we don't want to share information, but that's changed. We're taking our logos off.
Yeah.
We're taking our logos off. We can't just be AFCOM. We can't just be 7 by 24. We have to be data center advocates as a whole. And that's what this group is doing. We're taking everybody's information and we're putting it in one spot. And we're going to start working together, hosting educational events together. You're going to see more events that I think are co-hosted by multiple industry organizations versus just one, and get the word out about apprenticeships, scholarships. Right now, one thing I've noticed is, we'll have an organization and they'll have, oh, we're going to give away $50,000 in scholarships or $100,000 in scholarships. Well, guess where those scholarship opportunities get posted? LinkedIn. So we have to get these scholarships and apprenticeships into the schools, into families that don't know about digital infrastructure, and these students who have been identified, that need our help and need our support. And maybe they need computers, maybe they need technology to get through high school. Like, what can we do as a community to actually help these students? So that's one thing that again, that data center playbook is the community part of it, and then it's going to be part of something greater, the Data Center Awareness Network. And would love for Karen and I to come back and a few others and talk to you about what that looks like, because I believe we're starting it here in Virginia, but there's already people from all over the world that are becoming a part of this group. And I think that is what's been missing is we really need to find out a way to kind of work together as an industry.
Yeah. I think for, excuse me, one second. Um, yeah, back. There's so many great points you've made there, which going back to almost the emotive community impact that you have with kind of uniforms and things like that over the tax and the jobs. That thing is real today for people. And you mentioned about community, going into communities as kind of a big bad developer making money. The industry does make money and developers do make money, but from my experience over the last 8 or so years being within it and working very closely with developers, there's so many people that genuinely care about people and communities. And yes, there is money being made, but it's capitalist society. That is a thing. But there's just so many people that genuinely do care. And I think what you're doing now is bringing those people together and making a real impact. It's a really, really cool thing to hear about. And I'd love to be involved in it in some capacity
We
and
would
play a
love
small
you
part.
to.
One of
Yeah,
the reasons we do this podcast is to play a small part in trying to address a little bit of the balance. I don't know how many people hear it or how many people it will impact, but it's just trying to play a small part because yeah, it's really important for the future of the industry.
agreed.
Um, you mentioned there a touch on, because workforce planning in the future is going to be critical to the industry. And I think like what you're doing there as well is super important because you're building a pipeline of potential people and giving them a pathway and giving them a route that they may not have considered previously. That's how important is that going to be to the future of the industry in itself, in terms of being able to keep up with the demand and maintenance and everything else that goes with the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and the workforce development is obviously we're in crisis mode, and the beautiful thing apart of this is they're already. I was part of a panel just recently where one of the electrical contractors is doing exactly what I'm talking about with the community playbook. They're doing that on their own. So they're going into schools, they're meeting with the high schoolers, they're identifying students to say, hey, are you interested in learning more about electricity and being an electrician? Raise your hand. And they're finding these kids and then they're mentoring them because that mentorship, we've gotten away from that. I think informal mentorship is a beautiful thing. But what does that take? It takes one-on-one, and it takes and I think the subcontractors are are such an incredible weapon and being able to build out our workforce development, and our general contractors can help manage this as well as overseeing some of these programs in terms of all right, now that we are getting these tapping these students on the hands or the shoulders, and they're saying yes, we want to be a part of this. What do they need? Well, they need training spaces. If you look at what Meta just announced, same thing. Google has their STAR program. They're identifying training facilities and places where we can actually train these students, but this is going to take the ecosystem. So we need the subcontractors and the general contractors to partner with maybe even logistics companies and other folks to identify training facilities where we can establish boot camps. A friend of mine, um, Michael runs something called Next Level Technician, and it was just that. It was started out of Charlotte, North Carolina, but he said, "Hey, there's we need to train up and upskill our workers. Where are we getting the talent, and how are we going to do it?" But it's actually we have to create more of an environment for that training, and then you have LMS tools that you can use to actually onboard new technicians. That's another beauty of AI intelligence. They actually have apps. A friend of mine, John Trout at Check Hub, they have an app where you have a new technician when he comes in and he has his phone. And he's like, all right, I got my service ticket. I need to go over here and do this assessment on this piece of equipment. It actually will track him in the data center, and it's like, oh, Johnny's first day and he's supposed to be in data hall 4 and he's in data hall 2. So things like that, but it also gives him the ability to open up the app and say, okay, Johnny, today you need to be working on this rack and unplugging this cable, and while you're doing it, you're going to upload pictures and it's just going to help you do that. So but the reason I'm talking about that is we have to build out the tools to make sure that we're onboarding the workforce and that we're doing it in a responsible way, because as you bring new bodies and new people into data centers, we have to make sure that we're protecting the infrastructure uh, and training these our operators. We have safety. Safety is like the top, like ladder last. I think that's Meta's uh, uh, one of their things that they use is, we don't want our guys on ladders unless they have to be. But teaching safety, all of those things, we don't want to send much like when we send our young men to battle or young women to battle, we don't just send them right into battle with a gun. We have to send them through boot camps and train them and make sure that they're workforce ready. And we have to continue to work as an ecosystem on that. We can't do that in silos anymore. So what I would like to see is we've created this data center advocacy group. I believe that as a community and an industry, we need a workforce development coalition where if an electrical contractor is in Boise, Idaho, and they need to know how, hey, we have some students identified, we have the next ready generation, what tools are available to me to actually do this? And we have the resources. We have folks that can come in and provide this space and provide the opportunities. So I think that is the next step. And this is focusing on the work. And there's a lot of great companies, and if somebody who's listened to this podcast probably will say, oh, we're already doing that. We need to hear from you. We need to get this information somewhere so that we can replicate that toolkit across the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great initiatives out there. And like you say, it's preparing people so that not only they can get involved in the industry, but the industry retains them as well for future, because that's as critical as well in my view. But I can't let you go without asking you about kind of adaptive reuse. And I know that you guys are looking, you mentioned it earlier about kind of adaptive reuse of industrial buildings and that being a real opportunity. I know that you're working on some repositionings at this moment in time. What kind of buildings do you kind of scout, I guess, and why do you think that that's like a big opportunity for the industry across the next, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And there's different types of adaptive reuse. If we look at the easiest to pick off, the low hanging fruit, those are legacy data centers that have kind of been capped at what they're able to do in terms of power and our data centers. Especially if it's an AI or inference site, they just have different requirements, right? And we need more sites for them. So what does that mean? Well, we're going to have to take these legacy assets and we're going to have to upgrade them. That's an adaptive reuse rather than abandoning a legacy data center, which we see it all the time. People would be surprised at how many 1, 2 megawatt, 5 megawatt data centers are just sitting vacant. Nobody wants to dump the money into the infrastructure. Nobody wants to go in and crawl under equipment and identify what needs to be pulled out and replaced. There's an opportunity there. We need to, and there's folks, friends of mine, partners of mine, and we as a company, we love looking at these assets. We need to take a deeper dive and have more eyes on these buildings. And so I'd say that's one group. And a second group that I really love and which really pulled me into adaptive reuse was existing buildings, boxes in industrial environments where either the original user, tenant, owner of the building vacated because of whatever reason, technology didn't take off, maybe that manufacturing or whatever that was used for shifted to another geography or just died out. Well, there's a building sitting there, right? So I think it solves two things, especially if there's power to the building, right? Has to be power to the building. I think it solves two things. One, speed of deployment, because there's already a shell. If it fits the requirements, and there's a whole checklist of things you need to look at because you don't want too low ceilings, or there's just different things you need to look at. So let's just say the building works. The two things that I think is speed of deployment, because you've got a building, you got a powered shell. And then the second thing, the box is there. So when a community hears, hey, this building has been sitting here vacant, or this campus or whatever this was, some of these assets are 10 years. I think the community is going to be less likely to push back when they find out you're working within, for the most part, the box. We might have to put some equipment on the roof and lay down equipment, but there's a thoughtful way to do that as well. But I think that's another part of why these adaptive reuse projects are going to be really important. And then the third thing that we're actually seeing is the need for inference, these edge sites. I think stranded power, stranded capacity, we're going to see that across globally. It's taking the time and the resources to identify these areas. And I think that's where we can work with local municipalities as well. We need to give them the requirements and our local workers and our local say, hey, this is the square footage we need. This is the amount of power today in the next 3 years, or however long that what that looks like, and start giving it to them and saying, hey, if you find or if you hear about an opportunity where there's stranded power and a stranded asset, tell us about it. And we can actually go in there and use it. So again, the two things, speed of deployment and I think less community pushback because we're working within an environment that was an underutilized asset. So
Yeah, no, that's great. I totally agree with that how much of an opportunity that is, and the it comes back to that community piece though as well, making the opportunities overcoming some of those community objections with a reuse of an existing building that's not used now is quite surely a powerful, compelling reason to back it. Just want to finish on a high. We talked a lot about community engagement, and I'd like to just hear from you about maybe a particular project that's just got the community engagement piece right, and it's just made a complete difference. Is there one that springs to mind? Any acknowledgements you out there at all that you want to make? And it'd be good to hear
yeah,
about it.
yeah. So without speaking explicitly about the project, I can tell you there's one in particular that stands out, and it really is. I do get emotional about it because we're actually starting to see the community, their eyes kind of light up when they say, "Hey, there's an opportunity," and that's why we look at our country. And I know this is a global podcast, but we can look across globally and identify communities and people who um, just don't really have an optimistic view on life, and they don't really see the opportunity, and they just want it. They just want an opportunity. So I would say one of the community projects that we're really excited about is one where we're actually coming in and making a difference and truly making a difference. And back to Brian Darby at the Arizona Data Center Alliance, he said, when you put together your construction timelines, you have your civil due diligence, you're trying to get through that phase. And as you build out your construction timeline and a turnover to the data center, when you go back to that early part of your timeline, that's the community, that's where the workforce development starts. And so every time you're building out your timelines, your construction timelines and development, workforce development needs to be early, early, early. The earlier that is, and for us, it's starting very early. It should start around the same time that you're working through your entitlement and zoning is meeting with the community. And that's where you can be a part of these local groups that are actually have needs to get them to a point where they can handle a data center. And when you talk about somebody who wins the lottery or an NFL player that goes from nothing to something overnight, what is you have to be able to deal with the money and the revenue, and it really has to happen in a very thoughtful, careful way. And for us, the project that I'm most excited about is that we've been able to start workforce development very early, almost day one. We were meeting with schools and universities and high schools, and then we were able to, um, you know, again, contribute to things like uniforms, uh, bringing awareness and education to the community so that they're in a position to actually deal with the magnitude of the opportunity that's ahead of them. And the other
Yeah.
part of this, another project up in Pennsylvania, is when you meet with the union guys or these contractors who are looking just for an opportunity to work in their backyard. These are very experienced tradesmen who don't want to have to travel, and you're able to actually come in and educate them and get them ready so that you don't have to bring in a contractor from out of state. That is a great example of success. If you're building a data center today and over half of your workforce is from out of town, you have failed. You have failed the community. And we have to I think the success of projects are going to be how involved is the community in your data center, how much of the local resources you used. And yes, it's okay to bring in experts and superintendents and project managers. They need us, they need leadership, right? Especially when a data center is new, but they should absolutely be a big, big part of what you're building. And I think this most successful projects are going to have the community involved and they're going to be using local resources for workforce development. So that gets me really
Amazing.
excited.
It must be, yeah, it must be exciting. It must be hugely satisfactory to see the communities really benefit, truly benefit from what's happening around them. So, no, it's great to finish on the episode on that positive note. Your passion and is palpable, and also what you're doing with Karen and other people across the industry is admirable as well. So, um, thank you so much, Mara, for joining me on the Data Center Exchange today and trying to condense what is a truly complex, emotive topic in less than an hour. So thank you
Yeah.
very
Well,
much for
I'll
being
leave
so
with this.
eloquent.
Yeah, and I'll leave with this. Data centers became evil overnight, and I remembered it was halfway through my career. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And a lot of folks recently in the early, when we cut into January of this year, I think a lot of us were very pessimistic about what the future of our industry is. I was concerned. I'm starting to see hope and I see something beautiful getting ready to turn around, and we're being a part of that momentum. So anybody who's listening to this and just thinks, oh, it's all gloom and despair for data centers in the community, I'm seeing a shift and I'm seeing a change, and I'm really excited for the first time in a while of what we're building and part of something beautiful. So I'm really glad I was able to share this with you, Dell, and looking forward to some future episodes too.
yeah, future episodes for sure. Let's get Karen involved and let's talk more about this because it's not going away anytime soon. We don't want it to go away, I guess. We want to help people understand the industry more and the benefits and every industry has challenges, right? So it's just
Yeah.
about trying to overcome those challenges to help it flourish and grow. So yeah, thanks for being a great guest today. I look forward to on the next episode. We will talk a little bit about give a little teaser. We'll talk about the winery, the vineyard that you're helping to cultivate. So we need to hear more on that
Bees.
because I'm sure
Yeah,
there'll
and
be
I
many
have
people listening that will want to know more
yeah,
about that.
yeah, and I have my bees. So Gary Connolly, the DCs
Have
for
you
bees.
bees as well? Okay, amazing.
No, I was part of the DCs for bees when it came to the States initially. So I need to reach out to him and let him know I finally have my beehives. But yes, would love to talk about that.
Amazing. Lots to talk about. Mara, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Del.